Hey, it's Mark Linear with your video thought for the day. When I was a young man, younger than I am now, which I guess is an admission I'm an old man now? I don't know. Not in my brain, at least. But when I was a young man, I had a friend. Name was Ted. And Ted was, I was in law school. I think he was a little bit older than me. But when Ted had been a high schooler, he'd given his life to God. He had devoted and committed himself to God. But then after he graduated from high school, as he got a little older, he got into a life of carousing. He wasn't living a consistent godly life. And then Ted hit a point in his 20s when he decided to turn his life back to God. And so he did. But he was plagued by this deep insecurity. He was concerned that maybe he'd committed some unforgivable sin by turning away from God. After his high school years. He just didn't understand whether or not God would truly forgive him. Oh, I would talk to him and he would get a mental understanding, but deep in his heart, he still doubted his place with God. Well, I sat down with Ted and I went through the story that Jesus told of the prodigal son. Here's a son who grows up in a loving household, reaches majority age, tells his dad, I want my half of the inheritance now. I don't want to wait till you're dead. I'd like to go live my own life. He gets his money, he goes out and he squanders it, wastes the money, finds himself homeless, living in a pigsty, and realizes that even the hired help at his dad's home got treated better than his life was. So he thought he'd just go home and ask to be hired help since he'd squandered his rights as a son. As he's coming home on the road, the dad sees him and the dad goes running to this prodigal son. We'll hear nothing of hiring him or treating him like a servant. Instead, brings a robe and a ring and has a festival because his son came home. And I explained to Ted, don't you understand, in this parable, that's God. God is in the saving business. He's not looking to ruin people. He's looking to receive people into his love and his family. But even still, Ted wasn't totally convinced. So I turned to Paul's letter to Timothy, 1 Timothy. And in 1 Timothy, Paul says, look, I was a blasphemer. Paul was someone who sought to destroy the work of God, not live for it. And yet in the midst of that, God had mercy on Paul. Not only forgave Paul, but engaged Paul to work for him with an incredible mission and calling on his life. The bottom line for this is, as Ted grew to appreciate over the years, and my last contact with him was a year or so ago, but he's just so walking diligently and faithfully with God. The bottom line is, don't ever think you're in a time and place in your life where if you turn your heart to God, he won't receive you or use you, because both of those will happen. God is in the business of recycling garbage. And sometimes that includes you and me as he puts us to good use. And that, my friend, is your video thought for the day.